Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening to in the world. Welcome along to the Refuse to Lose podcast, named after the legendary Dale Earnhardt. The winner ain't the one with the fastest car, it's the one who refuses to lose. My name is Kieran McGinley, and as always, joining me is Austin Smith. Austin, how are you tonight?
I'm a little bit ill, still suffering from the flu a little bit, but so if you hear me sniffing a little bit, that may be why. I'll try to keep it to a minimum, but otherwise I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Kieran?
I'm not too bad. I've sort of left the cold behind me, so that's quite nice. I'm on the back end of it and feeling great. We have with us today a very special guest. It is actually Chris Buxton, the voice of the Formula One Esports series, which is taking place right now. We had Justin Sutton about a fortnight ago. Now we get Chris Buxton. Welcome along, Chris. You're very welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be in amongst the greats and what have you on this very show. Very glad to be here. Excellent.
So we should probably just kick off straight away with that Brazilian Grand Prix review. And, well, need I say more? What a race it was. Austin, we had an interesting chat just before the stream started about the safety car, but it was a kind of eventful race for the last 20 or so laps.
Yeah,
Everything was a bit it was sort of taking place, and that was about it.
Yeah, there wasn't much before. First 50 odd laps were very dull, very boring. But then it just kicks off and just up to 11 and just absolute insanity. We have Bottas out. We have the Ferraris colliding, which where have we seen that before? Vettel crashing into a teammate on a straight, I wonder.
And then blaming his teammate for it.
and then blaming his teammate for it.
Never seen it in my life before, no.
Yeah, and then we have Hamilton crashing into Albon, who was in a fantastic, I think it was third place at the time.
It was, yeah.
It was.
And getting himself a penalty, which then propelled Carlos Sainz onto the final step of the podium with Pierre Gasly in P2.
You would never have bet money on that. You would never have taken that bet.
The thing is, I think this was the first time since 1988 that two drivers were on the podium for the first time.
Yeah, that sounds like
the two drivers have taken their debut podium. It was something like that.
Yeah, I think 1988. I think it was two Frenchmen at the time, which kind of fitting that now Gasly continues that. I think it was Olivier Panis being one of them, and I don't remember the other, but I think they were both driving for Ligier at the time.
Well, as well as that, you've also got the first McLaren podium in F1 since Australia 2014. Now that is huge. I mean, the last podium getter for McLaren, any guesses?
In 2014?
In 2014, yeah.
Oh, it was Lewis.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, wasn't it?
No, it was K-Mag. Kevin Magnussen.
Oh, was it?
Yes, right. Kevin Magnussen got their last podium. Now Carlos Sainz gets to take that honour.
Nice. Somebody tweeted out, I don't know who it was, I can't remember who it was, that Lewis has scored a podium for McLaren as a result of last week's, as a result of Brazilian Grand Prix. I thought that was a brilliant tweet.
Well, also, Alfa Romeo got their best finish in the modern era. 4th place for Kimi Räikkönen, 5th place for Giovinazzi. I mean, it was such a hectic race that Alfa Romeo completely turned the tide in that one.
And Russell missed out on a sole championship point by 1.6 seconds, apparently.
Yeah. It's sad, but I mean,
very sad.
I really hope the Williams team can, pull some strings and pull themselves together. If not for next year, but for 2021, if they can hold out to then, hopefully they can get some good results back to where they probably should be, at least fighting for points, not just running around at the back there, because it like you say, it's just sad at this point.
Yeah, considering where they used to be when I very first started watching Formula One, well, I mean, most things were fed by coal back then, but Williams were the dominant force. Mansell and Piquet back in the Cannon Williams era, red number 5 and what have you. They were untouchable. Then McLaren took that particular mantle over in the 90s with Senna and Prost. So, but yeah, it's just so sad to see Williams celebrating when Kubica got their 1 point. Not that he deserved it, but that's another matter. Russell's more deserving of that point than Kubica is.
Yeah, but it's Formula One. That never works out the way. You can put in the hard work and determination, but all it takes is for your teammate to have a bit of luck. I mean, at the German Grand Prix, when you had the skating rink at the final corner,
that was insane.
So, it was wonderful. That's the word you're looking for.
But what a season we've had. I mean, the first 4 races were just dull. And then suddenly the season essentially just came alive and has been fairly damn good since. Even Monaco was a semi-decent race to watch, and that's unheard of in itself this year.
It is unheard of.
We'll have to mention one race in the middle, or not in the middle. It was pretty much to the early part of this stretch that was very dull as well, and that is the French Grand Prix.
Yes.
That was the one outlier.
Yeah,
but it's sort of what happens when you put a test track on the calendar. It's not a track made for overtaking. It's a track made for drivers to put in consistent laps. What do you expect?
But the long straight,
the long straight with the chicane in the middle.
With the chicane in the middle, is the only place anything happened, and I just love it when I'm fortunate enough that I can watch the races on Sky. I don't get to watch them live. I have 2 young children, so I invariably watch it, record it and watch it later. But I just find it very telling when, and you, my fellow commentators, can perfectly understand this, I'm sure, when you can hear when the commentators are struggling to find something entertaining to talk about. And Ted Kravitz is usually fairly blunt in that wasn't a very entertaining race, or worse to that effect.
I mean, I remember there was an interview he had with Eddie Irvine, talking about how modern F1 is just not very good. I mean, Eddie Irvine used a bit more expletives than that, but you get the gist of it. And he was saying all these modern buttons with like DRS makes overtaking really easy. And then after it all finished, Ted Kravitz turned to the camera and said something like, well, maybe that's another matter for whether Eddie Irvine could have become a champion with DRS and KERS, but that's a story for another time.
Someone's not a fan. Wow.
But, I mean, that's another story for another day.
Eddie Irvine never did himself any favors with his with his trap. He would. I remember seeing an interview with Irvine. It was one of these kind of teammate comparison things a number of years ago on Sky, I think it was. And he several times referred to himself as he could have been better than Schumacher. Schumacher was terrible at setting up the car. Excuse me? Try again.
I mean, that's an interesting one.
There's a podcast for you.
That's a whole separate podcast in itself. I mean, but we should probably try and rope it back to the Brazilian Grand Prix if we can. So, what I would say is there's sort of 3 main factors in it. Was it a safety car for Bottas? Who was at fault for the Ferrari incident, and who was at fault for the incident? I think it was at turn 10, I want to say. That sounds about right. Turn 10 between Albon and Hamilton. Well, Chris, because you're the guest, I'll let you go first. You can pick any one of those to choose from.
Okay, so safety car for Bottas, don't understand why. I do not understand why there was a safety car there. He pulled his car off track. He'd even found a gap in the barrier, hadn't he? He'd actually gotten. If he was still on the actual grass section next to the track, I could maybe understand it. Why didn't they put a virtual safety car out? There was no need to put a safety car out for Bottas under any circumstance. Did it make for a hell of a race? God, yes, it did. But there was no need for it. There was absolutely no need for it. Second point, Ferraris. I know this is a common, I've seen quite a few kind of Twitter arguments. In my opinion, 100% Vettel's fault. He had no reason at all to move over where he did. You see what he was trying to do. He wanted to defend the inside line from Leclerc. He moved over about a week too early to defend that. It was nowhere near completing the move. It wasn't even in the braking zone, nowhere near it before he started moving over. He had no reason to do so. I know I'm not a particular Vettel fan. I'm not kind of Matthew Gallagher levels of Charles Leclerc fanboyism either.
He's just passionate.
He's just passionate. I have nothing against Leclerc. I fully kind of, I wouldn't say expect, but I wouldn't be surprised if he took at least one championship, maybe two in his driving career. He's got a long career ahead of him. He is a fantastic driver. Vettel, I'm not a fan of, haven't been for a number of years, but that move was ridiculous. If the roles were reversed, I would blame Leclerc if he moved over Vettel at the same point. Third one, initially, I was very much that on the Hamilton Albon incident. Initially, I was very much that's entirely Albon's fault. He turned in, left the door wide open, but in hindsight, Hamilton came from quite some distance back, and that's not so clean cut. And I'll give Hamilton his due. He held his hands up to that, without any kind of, not doing what Vettel always did and did again, automatically blame the other party. Hamilton put his hands up straight away to that one. So, I as much as initially I blamed Albon, it wasn't that clean cut. Sure, he went for a gap, but it was a gap that was never, ever going to stay there. So I would put more blame on Hamilton for that one.
Yeah, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because Hamilton was demoted from the podium, the Brazilian Grand Prix podium set the record for the youngest average age on the podium, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I think that beat 2008 in Italy, I want to say. But yeah, youngest average age for the podium with Sainz being promoted. So that was a little bit of history there. But Austin, I know we were talking about it. You disagree with the Bottas safety car, or you disagree with the opposing view of it?
I have to say I do understand why they brought it out. Doesn't mean I understand the exact logistics of the whole incident, because as Kodiak said, they could have just pushed him in there and that would have been it, and VSC would have been enough for that. But because they had to, for some reason, I don't know why, but they brought the crane out, and because they had to bring the crane out and onto the track, that's an automatic safety car. Every time the crane just is slightly on the track. And the thing is, I think, you can put it down to F1 being a little cautious in the aftermath of Gilles Bianchi, that whole incident.
They've got no choice, though. They have to be. They can't be seen to essentially ignore that incident. They've got no choice. They have to be seen to have taken action as a result, particularly of a fatal accident.
Exactly. But I'm just saying that's where I think this rule comes from, really, that they say now, whenever a crane enters the track in any way, automatic safety car. Not even VSC, no, full safety car. And that's where it came from. The one thing I would question is, why was a crane needed in the first place? Why were they not able to just push that car away?
Had it seized by then? I mean, it was smoking rather well.
Well, according to the race report, it was a hydraulics failure. It wasn't,
It would have made it heavy, but it still should have been pushable.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Brazilian marshals aren't as strong. I don't know.
Isn't there something about if you don't leave the car in neutral, then it's almost impossible to move? Something like that.
I mean, obviously,
there's a button on the. Yeah, there's a button on the top that the marshals can press. That's something that's been in the car design for years, to basically force the gearbox into neutral. But that doesn't mean it will happen, which again could be down to, most of the vital parts of the car are controlled by hydraulics. So if it was a hydraulic failure, the gearbox may not have been able to select neutral. Could be something like that. I'm assuming it's something to do with the fact they couldn't have shifted it. But yeah, I get that, but I don't see why a VSC was not the better option. But I mean, if they've implemented the rule where they have to deploy a full safety car, then okay, they had no choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also gave us a great race at the end. So
didn't it just?
There's not a lot of complaining to do, but we've got Abu Dhabi next, and I've seen a lot of tweets saying about it's going to be such an anticlimax. I actually quite like Abu Dhabi. It might not be the best place to have a finale. Everyone will say Interlagos should be, but again, that's tradition coming in. There was a time when Interlagos was the second or third round on the calendar, and no one batted an eye then. There was a time when Suzuka used to be the title decider, the last round of the championship. Now it's about 4 or 5 rounds from the end. So I don't know. It seems a bit looking at it from rose-tinted glasses sort of moment there. I mean, what do you think about that?
I agree. It's difficult to say, this is the ultimate finishing track, or this is the ultimate end of the season. There are some tracks that promote more action than others, but then we've had some belting Brazilian races in the past that didn't need a safety car. So it's very much it's a subjective argument. Is what one person thinks is a good track, somebody else will absolutely despise, and they've got to have a running order of, they've got to decide the running order by some method. Brazil used to be at the beginning of the season. Go back far enough. Australia used to be the end of the season as well. The Formula One over the years has tried all sorts of different Canada combinations. So I personally, Abu Dhabi's okay. I don't dislike it. There's some tracks that I go, oh, great, here we are. Abu Dhabi's really not one of them, as far as I'm concerned. Brazil, I've always looked forward to Brazil as well. So even though it did, for the first half of the race, as you guys have said, didn't really live up to expectation. So yeah, as far as where should the season finish, I don't. I would be happy if it didn't finish. Like most of us fanboys would be quite happy if it never did. But that's obviously unrealistic. But Abu Dhabi's a decent enough track, I think. We will see. It might rain.
The fact that we had whatever bit of rain that was last year, I'm still not understanding this. But I'm going to make the argument right now. I think the final race of the season should be Bahrain.
Yeah, I'd have no argument with that.
No, I wouldn't either.
Because Bahrain, because of the track layout, most of the time gives us really good racing. It has 3 long straights back to back to back, where you can use DRS, overtake, all that stuff. It's gonna make for some great racing. It's the final race of the season, meaning that everyone's gonna be trying to get some points or trying to. Hopefully, the championship is still open at that point, which, to be fair, this year it's not, but maybe 2021. I like the track. I don't like to drive it because I'm not good on it for some reason, but I like watching it. It's always great racing there. And I was thinking about something like maybe Canada or Austria, but you can't drive Canada or Austria in November. It's just not possible.
You can. It won't go very well for you, I think.
Fair enough. But obviously, many of the European races and North America, let's say, or North America, because COTA is fine. COTA in October is fine, but Canada, Montreal in November, no, that's not going to happen. So you are limited in your choice. Brazil obviously works. But I think Bahrain would be a great last race.
Well, that's a pretty interesting one. We should probably try and swing it back to esports at some point. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Your show. I mean, I will derail most conversations.
That's all right. Well, let's move it on then. So, Chris, obviously, you've been in the esports industry for quite some time now. One of the staples in it. So, basically, where did it all start for you? When did you think this is what I want to do?
Well, you need to kind of come. As far as F1 esports is concerned, backpedal a little bit before then. I hadn't actually tried commentary in any way, shape, or form until I stumbled across. Well, you know exactly the avenue I stumbled across because you spoke to me about commentating on it a little while ago. It was, of course, Apex Online Racing. I stumbled across them essentially by pure accident. It was a case of I've been in the customer service industry a very long time, which is how I've kind of developed as I put it, my vocal presentation. My dad was worked his way through the salesman route, so I copied him in a lot of his mannerisms. I had for a couple of years my own Formula One show on the local radio station, through which I got to interview Jenson Button. That was quite fun. He's a very nice guy, I must say. So it was a case of what do I do next, and I thought I've been curious about commentating, but never knew how to enter that arena. So, and back then I was very much a Project Cars fanboy. So I kind of I saw a post on the Slightly Mad Studios forum about a Formula Renault 3.5 league that AOR was starting. And that just made me think, ooh, I wonder if I could try my hand at commentating that. So I found the forum, bugged someone. I couldn't even remember who I originally messaged, then put me in contact with the necessary people, and then tried commentary for the first time on an internet connection that couldn't stream. I had literally like 0.87 meg upload, your general domestic cheap as chips internet connection. So that obviously had to change. But initially I recorded my commentaries and uploaded them to my YouTube channel. It actually gave me something to do with my YouTube channel back then. And I must say, after my very first commentary, I was knackered. I was exhausted because I'd never done, obviously, the radio show is scripted. So, I'd already planned what I was going to talk about and when I was going to move from segment to segment. And as you guys know, when you're doing commentary, it's all instinct. It's all in the moment. And I'd never done anything like that before. And so this was in 2016. May 2016 was when I very first started. But I was just hooked. And again, I don't need to explain to you two the kind of adrenaline and the feeling of being there in the moment, especially when there's a lot of moments to shout about. And I had very positive feedback from the guys that I commentated for then, and the rest is very much history. But Formula One esports started at the tail end of 2017, I think it was. Now, I've not been involved in the live show productions. I wish I would happily do so, but you spoke to my partner in crime, Justin, 2 weeks ago. And, me and Justin have worked together quite a number of times in F1 esports terms. We weren't in the same. I'm trying to remember who I commentated with the very first season. It wasn't Justin, but I can't remember. To my shame, I can't remember who it was. But then the next season onwards, me and Justin have been paired together for the online qualifiers in whatever form they've taken. Obviously, this season it's been the Challenger Series and the Playoff Series, which, as a small reminder, the Challenger Series is a long or longer running, a 6-week running championship season, as championship in the form that we would know it and recognize it in any other form. Whereas the playoffs they're not quite unrelated races, but there's no championship that runs from one race to the next. It's, the top 7 get automatically put into the playoff for the next playoff race. The bottom 7 have to qualify again. And it's the top 3 from the playoffs on the final race. That's where it really counts. The top 3 from the final playoff race gets invited to the pro draft, whereas it's the top 7 in the Challenger Championship Series that gets put into the Pro Draft. So it's 10 spots available split over those two series, which has been immense fun. I love working with Justin. Me and Justin have commentated outside of F1 Esports as well. We did do part of a season at AOR for Formula One, one of my first seasons. I think it was my first season then, back in F1 2017. We've done another series outside of all that, VGP, virtual GP over in the Czech Republic. That season finished a couple of weeks ago, which is a shame because it's always immense fun. But as Justin kind of explained, we literally just kind of turn up, shout for a while, and then we disappear again. So from our side, it's quite, or certainly how I see it. It's a comparatively small part of the process, but it's quite a vital part of it to add the entertainment value to what you are seeing. So as far as F1 Esports is concerned, that's just continue to grow. And again, Justin rather well explained this last time. The way that F1 Esports has grown has been meteoric, and the support that the esports series has received from the participating teams is colossal. Now all 10 of them are involved. Those drivers that are signed by those teams get to go to the relevant training facilities that all the teams have. They're put through very much the same kind of training regimes that the real drivers will have. All those skills are directly transferable from the esports world to the real world. Of course, the physical aspect is the one area that they will need some help to catch up with, sure. But as far as the rest of it is concerned, racecraft, being able to handle pressure both on track and in a sort of a press situation, so many things. That's for driving technique, aggressiveness, control. So many aspects are directly transferable from the esports world that a lot of the naysayers will not, just won't see. And I've several times I've kind of not so much crossed swords, but tried to sort of say to people that just automatically try and shut esports down is pointless or what have you. And I'll point out to them, well, esports drivers already have taken to the real driving arena. Brendan Lee, not too long ago, was driving Formula Fords, I think it was. You've got Jambul Abbasi that's taking part in GT4 races. You've got Enzo Benito. Enzo Benito has done one of the biggest services to F1 Esports by beating it was the Race of Champions. Who was it? It was, I've forgotten. I had this fact in my head before we started, and it's now completely gone. Beating real life drivers at the Race of Champions. Identical, machinery on the same kind of track. We all know how the Race of Champions works. So you've got an esports, or esports drivers proving their worth to the real world. It's brilliant to see.
And I must ask, because this is a question I've never A, thought of asking, B, had the opportunity to ask. But King Kodiak, where does that name come from?
Way back in the annals of time. I need to explain its predating name as well. Now, when I very first got the internet, now bearing in mind, I am old. I'm older than Justin. He belayed his. I'm 39. I was born in 1980. So just to put it in context, I always feel very old whenever we're talking about anyone involved in esports as well, or indeed in kind of any competitive racing league. But I accept that. That's my mantra. But as far as where the name King Kodiak comes from, when I very first got onto the internet was in 1999. On a 56k dial-up modem, and I thought, what name can I use? I was genuinely clueless on what name to use. I thought, I know, and you, Mr. McGinley, as I've met you will testify, I'm not a small person. I am of a bigger stature. It's all right, you can say it. I'm a fat bugger, I know that. Now, I originally chose, and I kid you not, Munchie19 as my original online name. Yeah, laugh away. It's ridiculous.
I'm not laughing with you. I'm.
So after a while, I thought I need something that people would take a little bit more seriously than this. So me and a friend of mine, we kind of looked at Thesaurus and thought, what could we use? That wanted something that was a little bit more unique than I don't know, IR Destroyer or something equally as absurd. And it was actually my friend that came up with Kodiak, which is and this also links in with the bear. The Kodiak bear is a very large brown bear off the coast of Alaska. Kodiak Island, I should say, is off the coast of Alaska, and the Kodiak bear is a resident of. And me being a pretty big, pretty furry person, I adopted that. And the reason for adding King on the front was at the time that I started using Kodiak was when Mech Warrior was very popular, and there was a Kodiak mech contained within. So Kodiak was a common, semi-commonly used name. King Kodiak, however, was not. So King Kodiak was born.
Wow, that's a nice little story wrapped up in a bow. I've been taking all the questions, Austin. I'm sure you're.
You're doing a fantastic job.
Stop it, you.
But what I maybe this is going to put you a little bit on the spot here, but considering that you've seen and commentated over all the F1 Esports Challenger Series races, and you said what was it, the top 7 from the Challenger Series invited to the Pro Draft?
Top 7 at the end of the Challenger Series, yes.
Yeah. Okay. From each platform, or is it like all
7 from each platform?
Okay.
So
wow.
21 challengers, 9 playoff.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. It's 30 drivers. Wow. Who are the 3 drivers that you would think are most likely to not only make it to the Pro Draft, but also be picked?
Oh, you swine.
I said I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's a question I'm interested in.
Oh, now this is difficult because a number of drivers, particularly those that have gone through the process more than once, it's really, you can't always tell who's going to be picked by the team. Sometimes they make very surprising decisions. So it's not always easy to tell. Again, I've forgotten the names of half of them, such as my memory. It's actually been a few weeks since we've done an esports commentary, unfortunately. We were due to do the next Challenger Series last week, but for unforeseen circumstances, that had to be delayed, and it's not going to be for a few weeks' time. One name from each.
It doesn't have to be one name from each platform. It can just be 3. If it's 2 from PS4 and 1 from Xbox or whatever, that's fine. Just 3 names.
Xbox One has been really, really. Oh, you're going to hear my dogs barking now. Xbox One has been really heavily dominated. Is not quite the phrase I want to use, but you've had one real strong front runner. He has been beaten, but. He's had a real. I've forgotten his name. This is Justin's platform, so he'll know. He knows the names better than I. But Xbox One in particular has had a real strong front runner throughout the entire Challenger Series. So you would think I would be able to remember his name.
Sorry.
Honestly, the racing has been absolutely fantastic. It's impossible to be able to say, "Oh, this person will be picked," or "I expect this person to be chosen." It's not. It's never that. It's never that straightforward. I'm going to see if I can find Surprise. Veloci Surprise was the driver I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So I've just shushed. I tried to shush my dogs. Veloci Surprise has been so strong. Throughout the entirety of the qualifying rounds, for particularly for Xbox. Obviously, that's the platform he races on. But you compare, his performances even across platform, which is difficult to do at the best of times. But yes, any kind of comparison you make, and Surprise is right up there. I'll be stunned if he doesn't get chosen. As for the rest, it's not so clean cut. Preschneider is definitely a name that I would like to see chosen from the PC side. And again, me and Justin have touched on this when we actually do our commentaries, where we've commentated on the drivers that have gotten into this stage. Preschneider is a prime example. It's someone I have commentated on leading up to this point. So it was nice for us to be able to see them do well, having followed them at an earlier stage in their career. CN7 is a very strong one on the PC side. So again, I would expect him to get chosen PC side. As for PS4, the reason why I'm not so sure on the PS4 side is the platform I'm least familiar with. Being that I don't comment, that's very much your avenue, I've just realized. But also because Justin does Xbox One commentary, I do PC commentary, and we meet in the middle and say, yeah, we don't know who we're looking for on PS4, and we joke about that as well. So it's a bit more open. It's a bit closer on the PS4 side, if I recall. The Tiro Schnitzel was one name. Tactician is another one that has proven fairly strong. I'm sort of looking at the names of the Speed Bari. That's the name I was trying to remind myself on. He's definitely one to watch out for. So there's lots of names I could throw into the hat, but it means absolutely squat as far as who can get picked. There's a whole range of other things that the guys that make the biggest decisions look for. It's not just who made it through. It's a lot of the time is how they made it through. So if someone is, constantly barging people out of the way, or is very quick but exceedingly unreliable, those sort of things can act against you. Equally, if you've had a bad race and you spin on turn one, but you thunder through and still finish fifth or something, again, those things can act in your favor. So there's a lot of things that those that make the big decisions look for that we simply have no clue about.
All right. I have to say I've heard all the names that you did list, so I'm not exactly surprised, and it pretty much fits with what I've been seeing as well from when I was able to watch some of the Challenger series. But I do understand that you called me a swine for that question, because there's so many.
I know, because I can't remember them off the top of my head. That's the only reason.
Because there are so many that are just really, really good.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing as well. And even those that aren't necessarily doing so well in the Challenger series, these people should still be very proud of themselves for getting that far. It's something I also say about real life F1 drivers. It's very easy to slag off those towards the tail end of the field because they can't score or what have you. That's still the top of the ladder. That has still taken many years and lots of dedication and winning races in other categories to get that far, which is a very easy thing to forget when these drivers aren't at the top, when they're not winning, when they're not fighting for the victories. So, these guys are, some of the best in the world at the end of the day. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how well these guys that are going through to the pro draft. Again, not all 30 spots are decided yet. We'll add, of course, the playoff races can't be decided until the final race, which is hopefully next week. Looking forward to that. And the final Challenger series, in all three platforms, there's still spots to be decided. So that tells you how close it's been. The top seats, I think it's 3 on all three platforms are through. They can't be knocked out of that top 7. But the next 4 is still all open for up for grabs on the final round of the series. So it's been brilliant to commentate on. It's loved it. Absolutely loved every second of it.
What I will say as well is obviously you've established yourself in esports, both in the F1 esports series, as you mentioned, virtual GP as well. What's your plans for the future? Where do you think this could go? Where do you see yourself in, well, to use the typical interview question, but where do you see yourself in the near future?
Oh, Mr. McGinley, that's never an easy question to answer because, well, as you know, as someone that has done what I aim to do and actually done real life commentary, it's a difficult field to get into. I am hoping to get into the real life commentary box. I am in discussions with people. I can't confirm anything right now because nothing is confirmed. So as soon as it is, I'll be shouting from the rooftops. But I don't care what I commentate on. I could commentate on milk float racing for all I care. If it's something with an engine and 4 wheels. I say 4 because I've never really been into bikes. If the opportunity presented itself, sure. I just know nothing about bike racing, unfortunately. Not that I'm a particular expert in milk float racing either, but hey, I'll give it a go. But that's the kind of, I wouldn't say it's a natural progression because, I could stay where I am and continue to pursue, an esports career. But opportunities may well present themselves in the real life commentary box, and if nothing else, both esports and real life commentary, opportunities can feed one another. You'll gain experience. Again, I'm sure you can testify to that, having been in the commentary box recently. Kieran, loved it, by the way. Great effort.
Oh, thank you very much.
But yeah, it's something I would like to do. I do have to be careful though, as I do have commitments. I mentioned I do have 2 young children, they're 9 and 5. And they're both at school, and they have needs of their own. So I have to be very, very careful about how I divide my time. I can't put myself into every single possible commentary opportunity that came my way. I wish I would if I could do, but my family comes first, and I don't care for anybody that argues against that. So I have to be careful on what career path I follow or what opportunities I take that could lead to a career path, because I would absolutely take a full-time commentary position. Now that of course would mean a lot of traveling and what have you, but hey, if I'm earning the money, I'll be able to provide for my family. It comes back to that essentially. But at this point I do have to be careful about how much commentary I do, and that applies in the sim world as well. I did go through a phase at one point of kind of commentating too much and having a bit of a burnout. And at times when F1 Esports has been in full flow along with VGP and along with other things, that was quite difficult to kind of manage. By the end of the week, it was just like, a big ball of, knackered, sweaty mess, essentially. But as far as where I see myself, it's a bit difficult to answer because the opportunities I'm trying to chase at the moment, it rather depends on how or if that happens. So at the moment, not a clue, but I'm aiming to get real life trackside commentary under my belt and see where it takes me.
Well then, I think that about wraps it up. Unless you have anything to ask, Chris, Austin.
No.
No. All right. Well, thank you for the interview. I hope you'll be sticking around for the rest of the podcast because we've got quite a bit to talk about.
Unless you kick me out, no, I'm quite happy to stay.
Well, fantastic. So there's a new, I say quote unquote console, and I use it in the lightest terms because to me a console has a disk drive at the very least, but that's showing my age, how I don't see a cartridge slot or anything like that. Anyway, so Google have announced their Stadia. Now it's supposed to be releasing today. Now you tried to explain this to me, Austin. I was completely lost about how it actually works, but it's cloud technology. So
yeah, it's actually pretty simple.
No,
it is. Look, Kieran, I'm older than you, okay? And I understand how it works.
Don't be talking about the age thing, boys. My first computer games I ever played was on a Spectrum 48K. Now we want to be going there.
Yeah, we're going down there.
Yeah. But so basically, all you get when you order a Google Stadia, you get a Stadia controller, which pretty much looks like a fusion of the Xbox One and the PS4. I don't know, it's somewhere in between. and you get a Chromecast Ultra, which is basically nothing more than an HDMI stick that you put into your TV. That HDMI stick then connects to the internet, and through the magic of the internet, it then connects to whatever servers the actual console and the actual game then runs on, and then transfers that or displays that through the HDMI stick onto your TV.
Yes, you don't get the physical console as you would PS4 and Xbox One. You are essentially playing a console via cloud services.
Yeah, it's basically we have to talk PS4 here. I'm sorry, Kodiak, but
I am aware of what a PS4 is. It's fine.
Yeah, but are you aware of what PS4 remote play is?
I know the concept of it.
Yeah.
Again, it's a concept I heard of some time ago, but never kind of checked, because they were thinking of doing this with PC gaming as well to a point where
it's actually a thing on PC.
Oh, it did become a thing. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not that well known because PCs are quite affordable. Asterisk.
About that. Well, to have a gaming PC, you're looking at 4 figures for a really good.
Yeah, I'm not. That's why I was saying PCs.
It's a tad extreme, but
yeah,
you want to
that's
run.
why I'm saying PCs are affordable, not gaming PCs. That's the difference. But consoles are affordable. But this whole cloud gaming, I myself used one of those services called Parsec, and the thing is, though, it is quite expensive as well. Obviously not as a one-time payment, but over time, if you use it, yeah, it's getting quite expensive. And there's also, I think Shadow also does have this cloud technology. And there's also, Microsoft is also working on something similar to Stadia. They call it xCloud, which is probably the least creative name in a while. But hey, it's Microsoft, that's kind of what they do. And then NVIDIA has been working on what they call GeForce Now, which is, again, pretty much the same thing that Stadia does. But it's been in beta for a while, but it hasn't been, fully launched, fully released yet. And you can't get it. You have to be on a waiting list, and only a select few get in. So, basically impossible to get in. Unless you're, influencer on YouTube with 10 million subscribers and stuff like that. Then they'll fast track you, obviously. But other than that, it's really hard to get in. I am on that waiting list for months now, maybe more than half a year, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. But there's plenty out there that are working on, but Google Stadia really was the first one now to push it and release it for the general public.
I think the point of explaining the Stadia is because Grid is going to be one of the games available with it, as well as I think the Crew 2, as well as the latest Trials game and a motocross game that has slipped through my mind right now.
Supercross. I think it slipped through everyone's mind.
Supercross 3. Okay,
exactly.
With Grid, they announced that they were going to be expanding on the 16 opponents, and they'd be introducing an endurance series with up to 40 opponents. Now, but this version is only going to be available on the Stadia. So I think that's going to turn a lot of heads, and a lot of people will be asking, well, why isn't it available for all consoles? And I'm just trying to think myself, is that something to do with the cloud? Is that somebody trying to say, well, the only way we can do this is through the cloud?
Well, the thing is, the computing power that the Google Stadia offers through their server-based system and their cloud-based system is remarkably higher than what a PS4 or an Xbox One or even most PCs can offer. You get 60 FPS, 4K. I think, is it limited to 60 FPS? I don't even know. It might actually be more. Let's see.
That's a subscription. So much like you have a subscription to PS Plus or Xbox Live, I think it's $9 a month to access the cloud-based technology to run the console itself. That seems a tad extreme to me, but I mean, from the base price, $200. I mean, that's not. It's $200, £200.
Well, the thing is,
dollars, 120 quid.
Yeah, 120. Yeah. So that's not exactly unaffordable. And compared to the base price of an Xbox One now, that's $289. When you look at a PS4 Pro, you're looking at £310, £320. So it's not exactly unaffordable. But is it something that's going to catch on? Or is it more of a gimmick? That's what I'm trying to figure out at this point.
Seems to be getting. I mean, this concept seems to be getting a lot of, it's getting a lot of attention from several different people. I hadn't actually heard of Google Stadia until you guys mentioned it. I'm just reading about it now, but they all follow the same kind of premise of, the actual hardware doing the actual game computation essentially is somewhere else, and you just have the means to interact with it. Subscription price is currently £9 a month, apparently. I'm curious about it. And now I'm old and cynical, so changes as like, it wasn't like this in my day, I automatically won't like it. It's not quite that bad yet, although I'll get there, I'm sure, one day. I'm just reading about this, and the Stadia controller requires a Wi-Fi network and a mobile device running Android 6, which is archaic in Android terms. But you have to have a smartphone as well.
Who doesn't have a smartphone?
You'd be surprised. You would actually be surprised. Or this, other operating system called iOS. Don't get me started on Apple. That's a whole nother argument. But why? What's the point of the phone?
Is that necessary? Actually,
I'm just reading from from a Google page itself, and that's what it states: is that the controller requires a Wi-Fi network. Well, that's fairly obvious. And a mobile device. It doesn't say why.
Oh, I think I know why, but the thing is, I think it can be anything that can connect to Wi-Fi. So it could even be a PC that can connect to Wi-Fi, because you need another Wi-Fi device to set up the Chromecast Ultra. Because it does have a Wi-Fi in there, but it has no screen. It has, I think, maybe one button or two, but you have to connect you have to connect it through a mobile device, or it works with a laptop, it works with a PC, but anything that can connect to Wi-Fi. I have done that with my Chromecast, which is not a Chromecast Ultra, and it's very old in hardware terms, which is like 5 years maybe now, and you do need the smartphone or whatever device you have that can also connect to the Wi-Fi to connect the Chromecast to the Wi-Fi. For no other reason. You don't need it afterwards. Okay. You don't need to have the smartphone next to you every time you play. No. Just for the initial connection.
Yeah, that struck me as a bit odd. I don't see the point of the phone, but there we go. Yeah, like you say, it's because you don't have a means of setting up the actual Chromecast thing any other way, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this. I'm dubious as to whether it will get the necessary support that it needs to really kind of stand on its own 2 feet, because I have issues with subscription-based services. That's a very hypocritical statement considering I played World of Warcraft for 5 years, but that's another argument. I have a problem with PS Live and what's the Xbox version of it? Is it the Xbox subscription? But I have an issue with that. Whatever they call it. I have an issue with that. You've bought the game, you've paid full price for it. Why should you have to pay to play it online? I have an issue with that, and I don't see an acceptable answer to it. Steam doesn't do it. You don't pay to use Steam. You buy things through Steam, obviously. But, you don't have a subscription-based service for that. That platform's to survive perfectly well. It's not like Sony and Microsoft need the money. I'm sure they get a hell of a lot of money for it, so they're not going to drop those services. And it's not like you have a choice either, as those being your consoles of choice. You don't have an option. You have to pay. I have an issue with this, and of course the kind of gaming through cloud options have to, they're going to adopt that same model, because there's no hardware to buy. They need to recoup their costs somehow. But
so the thing is, you don't the Google Stadia Pro subscription is not necessary. It's not necessary to play on, as far as I'm aware. It's not necessary to play online. You do get 3 months as for free as you buy the Stadia, and then you can. It is necessary if you want to play in 4K.
It does say non-subscribers may experience up to 1080p and 60 FPS.
Yeah, exactly. So 4K only for Pro subscribers, but 1080p, so full HD, you still get without a subscription.
Well, as well as that, there's the running cost of it. Obviously, you have Xbox Live and PlayStation Plus. They're what, 40, 50 pounds a year, if I'm trying to remember it rightly.
Yeah.
But if you look at the £9 a month that the Google Stadia is charging, that's £108 a year. That's more than double what Microsoft and PlayStation charge to use their online services. At £108 a year. Soon, in terms of which one should you buy, well, Stadia looks good in the short run, but 2 or 3 years down the line, was it worth, putting £108 a year into the online service?
Well, the question is, is it worth it? But you have to calculate it long term, and I think you have to compare it to every platform, not just PS4 and Xbox One, also to PC. How often would you buy, if you want to be up to date and you want to play the newest games, and you want to be able to play them in good quality? You would probably have to upgrade, or maybe even buy a PC every 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years.
I'd say that's about fair.
Yeah. And let's say it's that gaming PC every 5 years costs you $1,000 or £1,000. I'm talking to two Brits here.
Whoa! I've never spent that much on a brand new rig. But there's one flaw to your argument: is that is your choice, and you can upgrade a PC piecemeal. You do not have to, although depends how old your rig is. You might have to do the entire lot. But you could save up over 6 months and get a new graphics card. You could save up over a few months and get an individual component. So you don't have to fork out that entire lot. That is choice, and that you don't have a choice to pay these subscriptions, and that's where I don't think the argument's quite close, but not quite there.
Well, again, as far as I understand it, you do have a choice. If you want to play in 4K, sure.
Yeah, that's
choice.
the thing I'm curious about, and that seems to be the standout thing for the Stadia against because I believe the other I forgot the names of them, but the other options you mentioned earlier, that's following the same model, they are subscription based, I believe, or from what I previously read about them, and that seems to be where the Stadia is standing out, because there isn't a forced subscription. There is like you said, the Pro one is. I'm very curious on how they're going to maintain that.
Well, first off, Google has bucket loads of money. I think that is very well established at this point. Second, I think they will most likely, obviously, get a certain cut from every game that is sold on their platform.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Yeah, so that's in part how they make money. And I think their calculation is that they say, hey, first off, if you want to get the Stadia Pro and you want to get okay, so I just read something here. But yeah, I'm all over the place. So where was it? Anyway, I'm just gonna skip here. The free version, which they call Stadia Base, is not available yet. So right now you are in a kind of forced subscription, but they say it will be available next year. At what point next year, we don't know, but they will offer a free version where you don't have to pay the 10 euros, £9, whatever, every month.
Interesting.
And then they will apparently also do the same kind of thing that PS Plus and Xbox Live do, where if you do have that subscription, you get free games every month.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's an interesting one.
So I'm gonna have to look. I think for PS Plus, good thing I have my PlayStation on right now. For PlayStation Plus this month, you get for free. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Oh god, I don't know what these games are.
Banana Simulator 2019.
No, that would be cool. No, Outlast 2, and Nioh, I don't know, Nioh. Both games would cost 50 euros.
That sounds like the noise I make when I kick something with my bare feet.
I also like the optimistic pause from you, Austin, as if one of us was going to say, "Oh no, it's actually pronounced this."
Maybe
No
idea.
I tend to be optimistic. Yeah,
I will drag us back into the esports mode. So
no.
Sorry,
carry on.
Back into sort of esports mode. Do you think the Stadia has a future in esports, in competitive esports? Is it possible?
I mean,
if the gumph that is available at the moment, gumph slang term for meaning information, I don't see why not. It kind of needs to prove itself, really. I'm curious. I've got a bit more optimism than I normally do with with new kind of innovations like this. I normally no, I'm sticking to my old ways, that kind of thing. But I'm very curious about this. But what I don't quite that's going to be very internet dependent. That sounds like a really obvious statement, but I think because you've now got more internet dependency on a service like that than you normally would, because you're not streaming the game to yourself and then up to somewhere else at the same time when you're playing on your console or your PC, that's going to put a lot more stress on internet connection. Now, internet connectivity in the UK is pretty naff in comparison to pretty much everywhere else. So I think at the moment that's going to it's not going to be as universally available as far as the competitive scene is concerned, because you've got additional restrictions that would make competition that much more difficult, namely the connection issue. I think if you've got if you're in an area that doesn't have great internet connection at the best of times, that problem becomes exacerbated when you're using a service like this. So I don't know. It's the honest answer to that. It's in theory, I would say it's possible, but I think it's going to have to prove itself.
And how about you, Austin? It's got any future sports?
I think so. Yeah, considering the internet connectivity does get better and better throughout pretty much most of the world. I mean, if we look back 5 years, 10 years, Yeah, it's gotten a lot faster. And not just not just in the cities, in rural places as well. So I think that it may be an issue now as Google Stadia is released, but I think that will soon be a thing of the past where oh no, my internet isn't fast enough. That's not going to be too much of an issue going forward. I would say within the next 3 or 4 years, probably. That problem will have solved itself. And because I've seen a test where they've been measuring the strain on the connection, and they said when you play in 4K, it takes about 25 to 40 megabits per second, which is something not every household has. There's plenty of households out there with maybe 20 mbits, maybe probably 30, but there's also plenty with 50 and 100 and some even more.
It's also the cloud that it's coming from, because how many people can they serve at 4K at the same time? Yes, okay, there's going to be more than one cloud site, of course there are, but there's going to be many millions of people that want to use this system at the same time. It's more that I'm curious about.
Have you forgotten who we are talking about here? It's Google.
Yeah, but they run YouTube as well, so
and perfectly
they
fine.
Own YouTube, I should say.
They own YouTube, they run YouTube, and it's available pretty much 24/7 with billions of people watching.
I can't imagine there's no way that watching YouTube is going to be comparable to online gaming as far as traffic is concerned. 4K gaming is going to need a massive more amount of the traffic.
I think it is comparable, considering obviously not on the micro level, one person to one person. Obviously, gaming would take a lot more. 4K gaming even more so, but if you compare the whole user base of YouTube, which is literally billions, and compare it to the expected user base of Stadia, which is going to be in the maybe in the tens of millions at some point. I don't know the actual numbers for like PS4. Let's see, PS4 sales numbers.
Well, to be honest with you, the PS4 is no match to the PS2, which is the highest selling games console of all
but
time.
that didn't have internet. I mean, it did have, but you needed an adapter. But so the PS4, the total number of PS4s sold was 100 million, so just over 100 million. Second best selling console of all time. So it's actually quite a good comparison. The PS2 had 155 million. The PS4 has 102 now, 103. But let's say 100 million is the cap, which would be an enormous success for Google. Absolutely, no one would expect them to sell 100 million of those. I think if you compare that to, let's say, how many people use YouTube in the world? 2 billion, maybe.
At least 3.
At least
3. Okay. So we're talking a factor of 30 there. Is there a factor of 30 between watching videos on YouTube and gaming in 4K? I would say roughly yes. So basically what they need to do is just get this or double the infrastructure of the of YouTube, or duplicate the one of YouTube and give it to Stadia.
You do realize how big an infrastructure that is.
Fair enough, yeah, but I mean, if you scaled it once, you can scale it again. They have experience, they know how to do it.
I don't know how to do it, but are they going to spend the money to do it is going to be the real question.
Well, do they have to spend all the money to make it? So the 100 million get it. I think
that's the thing, isn't it?
I think they can scale. Yeah, I think they can scale quite well. Like, if there's one company in the world that has more experience with scalability than any other, it's probably Google.
I would say as well that it has a promising stance in esports, because you've got the Google Stadia, and Google also own YouTube. So the integration there would be so simple
Yeah.
for them to introduce. They wouldn't have to worry about, oh, we need to get permission from the broadcaster. We need to get no, you could just go straight to YouTube if you really want to. I mean,
True.
So the integration is so wide open for Google that it's almost like missing an open goal if they don't actually do anything with it. And if it comes to a point where they can broadcast esports, then I would say, Google could be at the forefront of that. I think they're seeing the potential that the cloud has and are trying to harness the technology. I mean, 5 years ago, I could never have imagined a console like the Stadia even being thought of, let alone actually made. And this was me 5 years ago. So goodness knows for anybody else. So I don't know. It's an interesting time for Google. And I mean, let's just see what they do with it, because I've got nothing else to say. I realized I was going to say a but then actually no words were in my head. So I didn't know how to tail off.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. If they support it, if they support it, it's their own product. But yeah, if they actually develop it, that was the word I was actually aiming for. If they develop it properly, and they allow, also third-party developers, how are they going to get involved in, making games? I mean, is there a kind of transfer process for porting games from the platforms we know to Stadia? I mean, assumingly that's the thing.
They do have some games ported over already from non-Google. I mean, has Google ever developed their own games? I couldn't remember a single Google game. So if they did, perhaps. It wasn't successful. But at launch, Red Dead Redemption 2 was ported over, which is obviously one of the best.
That's not
games.
a bad title to choose.
Exactly, one of the best games of this generation, of this console generation. That was just ported over to PC. It was released 2 weeks ago. And now comes to Google Stadia as of today. Today, Google Stadia was released, and Red Dead Redemption 2 on Stadia with it. The Crew 2, which I fell in love with over the last weeks and months, ever since I bought it, because, it's just a really fun game. That was ported over. A Ubisoft game. So... a Ubisoft game, so nothing to do with Google. And there's plenty of others. I think it started out with 22 games, and more are going to come. 42 games are confirmed total, so 20 more are confirmed to come. And then I'm pretty sure they do have a kind of way to make it easier for games developers to port their games over.
Interesting.
So
I'm very intrigued to see how this develops.
It's got a huge amount of potential, but let's see how it all goes down. Right. Now, to bring it back off of esports, one of the topics we had planned, Austin, was favorite F1 race of all time. Now, I'll go first because I want to sneak in and grab this one for myself. But Canada 2011 will forever be my favorite race. I mean, Buxton, I think in the end it ended up being a 6-stop for him, and two of them I'm pretty sure were drive-throughs. So.
Yeah, I think it was officially a 4-stop.
Yeah, and he was put in the wall by Hamilton at once as well, wasn't he, in that race?
Or was it the other way around? I thought that was the other way around because the
McLarens came together. I seem to remember.
Yes, that's right. But it was Buxton moving across, and Hamilton. It was a bizarre one. One that actually got him a drive-through. So that was one of the drive.
Oh right, yeah, it was. Yes, beg your pardon.
So that's another point of teammates colliding. But you imagine for Vettel, it was. The official race time was something like 4 hours. It's the lowest average speed of a race in its history.
Yeah, but 2 hours was the commentators talking about how the ducks were swimming on the track.
And they did superbly well.
Didn't they just?
But it was It was amazing because it's something that Formula One really never had done before, which was sort of it's not in that 2 hour chunk. It was now it's 2 hours within a 4 hour period, which is I believe how it is to this day. So when Vettel lost it at turn 6, and it's one of those things where it's a drying track, and remember Button's exceptional in those conditions, made his name for driving in those tricky conditions where it's a drying track or it's just starting to rain. He just had a sixth sense of where the grip was. And seeing Vettel lose it just by putting one tyre on the wet stuff, and that was enough to send him into an oversteer, and Button goes through on the final lap. And for half a lap, I've seen an interview with JB about it, and he said for half a lap he was thinking, right, you can't F this up now. You've start now to F this up. But honestly, just an incredible feeling when he crossed the start-finish line, and that sort of reinforced to me that Button is a deserving driver. Forget about this debate about, he was in the right car at the right time. Yes, he was, and that was outstanding. The team didn't have enough financing. Brawn GP didn't have enough money to develop the car, but they certainly had the head start that they needed, and that's pretty much all they needed. From then on, Button's proved himself time and time again to be a world-class driver.
Which year was this? That was 2011.
2011, but I was talking about his
Brawn was 2009. Yeah, I was about to say that.
I was talking about that. I didn't actually segue into it properly.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
When he won his championship, he was in the right machinery at the right time, but obviously they didn't have the money to develop. Even with halfway through Virgin coming up and sponsoring the car, why not? So that was not only, I think, Jenson Button's greatest drive, but probably one of my favourite races of all time. So I've managed to steal that one away from you two. I'm interested.
No argument from me on that one. As a long-time McLaren fan, I did enjoy that one.
It wasn't necessarily that Vettel had lost the back end, but it certainly helped in a season where he just dominated. He absolutely dominated. And to see that chink in the armour that Vettel had, it proved to me that Vettel is human. And that just reminded me, Formula One is so unpredictable that you can't predict the predictable.
No. Great way to put it.
Well, I don't know who wants to go next.
Austin, be my guest.
All right. For me, the runner-up for me has changed this season, but the all-time greatest is still a different one for me. But the runner-up is obviously the German Grand Prix of this year. Who could forget?
Belter.
But for me, my favorite F1 race ever, mostly or in part because I was so young when I was watching, and it was pretty much one of the first races I watched, was the 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix. And I was 10 at the time, so good days. And it was, in case some of the viewers or listeners don't remember that one, which they should. It was the one where Mark Webber crashed out, and then Fernando Alonso crashed out into a tire of Mark Webber, and then into the wall and into the other wall. And red flag. Raikkonen originally, proclaimed the winner, but then on the green table, Giancarlo Fisichella gets his first ever F1 win in a Jordan of all cars.
Oh, yeah.
that was, and I remember it for one specific incident, and that was obviously as a 10-year-old German in 2003. You're a Michael Schumacher fan. There's
understandably.
There's no argument way. There. There's no way to get around that. And so was I, obviously. But at that race, Schumacher in the Senna S spun out into the wall, was out of the race because of the rainy conditions. Kieran was talking about these changing situations, changing weather periods from dry to wet, wet to dry with Jenson Button was great. Schumacher on that one he got caught out there, and it started to rain. He was on dry tires, and he lost it on the exit of the Senna S, the second left-hander, and into the wall. And he wasn't the only one there. That was like, I think it was 2 or 3 cars at least.
Didn't they all arrive at the same time?
Yes.
Or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, because Button was one of them as well.
He was, yeah.
It's all come full circle.
Yes. But I remember that. I was watching this. I was like, no. But then the race went on, and I was like, oh, no, I want Fisichella to win. For Jordan.
Yeah, but do you know why everyone kept going off at that point in the center exit?
I don't
There was
remember.
a lake across turn 3.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
I mean, the drainage was so bad at Interlagos that because the heavy rain just literally made a river right in the middle of the corner. Yeah, of course, exactly what you want to lose traction in the middle of an increasing speed corner.
I remember now. What I remember is that the I'm pretty sure it was the world feed. They zoomed in on that river, and
they did. Yes, they did. You're absolutely right.
And I think the German commentators were like laughing about it. They were like, "Oh, look at this! That's cute." The river across the track. Oh, and then people started spinning out, and it wasn't. And Schumacher started spinning out.
Yeah.
It wasn't so cute anymore. All of a sudden.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, when water catches out the Der Regenmeister. That's how you know the conditions were pretty bad.
Yeah.
For me, one of my favorite races is actually for the same reason you just stated, Ossie. It was one of the first ones I remember watching. The 1957. No,
I didn't want to say
it. Not that old. 1987 Silverstone. This would be the Williams pair of Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet. In recent years, or in recent months, I should say, I've rewatched a lot of older races just to kind of remind myself of what actually happened. As I am a bit of a kind of I collect a lot of kind of stats and stuff for old F1 races. Have done for years, just as a pastime. But I wanted to kind of see what happened. It's all well and good knowing what the result, but it's fascinating seeing how the result was made. You go back far enough, and only 5 finishers are in certain races. Monaco, I want to say 97 comes to mind. It was 97 when Ligier made their one and only win with Olivier Panis.
What a win!
Well, yeah. By essentially not hitting the wall, which is difficult enough to do at Monaco. But why 87 Silverstone? Silverstone. Silverstone for a British fan is always going to be going to be pretty spectacular. But it's the famous Mansell sold Piquet the dummy on the Hangar Straight and then flew past at some stupid miles an hour. But there's a lot from that era you could potentially pick. I think Adelaide of that same year, or certainly of that same era, where Senna and Mansell are inches apart, hooning it down a straight. I think it was Australia, but I can't quite remember which second that was. But that was one of the first races that piqued my interest. I was 7 back then, so that was kind of made me think, "Ooh, fast cars, looks fun," kind of thing. So. Which initially, being that Mansell was driving for Williams, that initially made me interested in Williams. I can't remember at what point I became a McLaren fan, but it was certainly 91 was what's going to spring to mind for the Senna Prost era, which switched me over to McLaren. But 87 Britain, one of the first races I saw, and that incredible move from Mansell to overtake Piquet.
3 great races, I have to say. One of the, as we sort of look to wrap up this podcast, I would have to ask you, Chris, if there's anybody listening to you now who obviously are a big fan, we're big fans as well, Austin and I, what advice would you give to someone starting out or thinking of starting out in commentary?
Well, firstly, thank you very much. It's humbling to hear those that are a fan of what I do. I'm asked this quite a few times, tips to start out. And it boils down to broadly the same answer. Don't do it. You're mad. No.
Don't even start. Don't even bother.
Don't pick a stage that's too big to do, for your very first attempt. And the reason being, now that could sound like a bit of a contradictory statement, bearing in mind I went to Apex Online Racing, one of the biggest leagues in Europe, but I went for Project Cars as opposed to F1. But equally, I had a lot of life experience behind me. Like I say, I've been in the customer service industry for many years. I was on the local radio, so I'd already built up my own method of dealing with pressure. And again, and I'm sure you two can testify that when you are commentating, especially when you're entering the arena inexperienced, you definitely feel it. And I did. I certainly felt under pressure when I very first came to the commentary box, was back in mid 2016. And unless you have your own mechanisms for dealing with that, it can really put you off, especially if you're very young. I'm not meaning to sound patronizing, but obviously, I'm nearly in my 40s. So I've had many years to build up my own mechanisms of doing that. If you're, say you're coming out of school or still in school, for instance, and you want to give it a try, obviously esports being a very, a lot of the drivers are, teenage and early 20s, particularly for those that may be inspired by those drivers, could be 15, 16 years old, that don't have the life experience behind them to deal with pressure, because the general public don't pull their punches. They don't care how young you are or how inexperienced you are. If they don't like you, they will sure as hell tell you that. And again, I'm sure you can both testify to that. We've all been on the receiving end of the keyboard warrior. So pick an area that is going to take that pressure, lessen the pressure. You're always going to have a little bit of it, because you're putting yourself in the public ear, essentially. So maybe find a league that maybe doesn't have too many people to start with, smaller race, whatever. Start small. It's essentially what I'm getting at. Build your own kind of methodology, your own mannerisms, your own phrases, because they've all got to come from somewhere. Again, we all have them, and we all have, they've all come from doing what we do on the regular basis, but you've got to start somewhere. So start small. If you start too big, you run the risk of basically just coming under the public fire and it putting you off. You could be the next Murray Walker for anybody knows, but if you're put off of it too early, that potential is gone. So, start small and build it up slowly, but patience is definitely the key. Don't think, oh, right, I'm going to aim for esports in 6 months. Whoa, steady on, sunshine. Build it up over time, because you've got to have the confidence behind you to deal with potential backlash and to deal with being on a potentially very big stage. And you're not going to do that straight out of the box if you haven't got, as I say, life experience behind you to deal with it. So essentially is start small and build it up, but build it up at your pace, your way. May not necessarily work for everybody. Very, very true. But it's got to be natural. It's got to be authentic. It has to be you. Very, very, very important point there. It has to come from you. It's no point trying to be like somebody else, which is easy to say. And especially when you're starting out, you do look to others to how do they do it. I've no bones about admitting I am a David Croft fan. I am a big, big Crofty fan. And I do look to him and the likes of Murray Walker to gain some tips, but I still do things my way. But you don't learn how to do it your way until you've done it a few times. And it could take several months, could take a couple of years. It's very important you don't rush it and you develop it at a pace that suits you. Also, equally, you might find, well, you know what, this isn't for me. Well, if you started small, then you've got less whiplash to deal with, essentially. So, yeah, it comes back to the same point. Start small, develop at your pace, and do it your way.
And I think that's a pretty good statement to wrap up the stream. What do you think, Austin?
Yeah, I would add the do it your way part is something that I think is just, I mean, all of it is pretty much often overlooked as for commentators who just start out, but especially the do it your way part, because it happens so often that when I listen to some other commentators do commentary in whatever way, just any sim racing related commentary, and I hear this is my absolute pet peeve. At the start of the race, they say it's 5 red lights and away we go. The crofty line, crofty line. Don't do that. It's a crofty line. What you want to do if you want to, build yourself up, because as Kodiak, as you said, you want to build yourself up. You don't want to start big. You want to start small and then grow organically. Kind of like a plant or a human. And you want to build your own kind of brand. Is a horrible word for that, but it kind of, it hits the point. You want to build your own brand of commentary, and you don't do that by using someone else's pretty much catchphrases at this point. I mean, you got to find your own and develop your own kind of catchphrases are part of it, but don't get too hung up on it. Don't sit there for hours thinking what would be my best catchphrase. But it's gonna come naturally at some point. You're gonna watch back one of your commentary gigs, and you're gonna listen. You're gonna think, well, that's a good one. I did that really well, and then you just keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. The one I always say, I don't do the lights out as away we go. I always say wind them up and let them go, which I can't even tell you at what point I thought of that one. I think, but it follows. I know why I came up with it. It was exactly as you just said, is to not copy somebody else. I was very keen very early in my commentary career to do it the Kodiak way, not me being somebody else. But of course, I had to build what the Kodiak way was. I'd never commentated before, as I mentioned. So,
can I just interrupt you for a second? The Kodiak way might be the perfect title for your biography.
Noted.
Not a bad name at all, I have to say.
Yeah.
Oh dear! So someone once asked me where did I get my usual? That's another thing. I always open my commentaries in the same way. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, brothers, and sisters. A lot of people ask where did I think of that, and it exactly as you've just summarized. It just came to the good afternoon bit. I must admit I nicked that from an old colleague of mine, but the rest of it actually. Just popped into my head. I use that in my radio show before I started commentating, and I thought I need a catchphrase of some description, and that one just arrived. It's had a few different variations. I sometimes throw in there fresh faces and racing aces, but then it sounded like if you need to breathe halfway through your salutation, you've made it too long.
Yeah.
So it has to come from you. It has to develop naturally. It's really obvious if you force it. You might think you've gotten away with it. Listen back to it, you'll know. And the thing is, so will everybody else. It's not worth it. It'll come to you. Just do you. At the end of the day, you will find. You'll find out very quickly if doing commentary is for you. I knew after my first commentary, even though I was utterly knackered, I actually went to bed straight away after my first commentary. I was in bed by 9 o'clock. I was exhausted, but I knew I was hooked. I was like, this is what I want to do. And you will know as soon as you've done, first one, second one, whatever, you'll know really quick whether this is for you, whether it's something you want to pursue. So find a league, find a platform, and carry. Even if you have to practice on, this is something else I recommended to a newer commentator, less experienced commentator. You might feel a bit of an idiot for doing it, but it is a way to practice your art. Commentate on the AI. Watch the AI doing their thing and practice what you would say in certain situations. I didn't use that particular methodology because, like I say, I've got a lot of life experience behind me already. But if you're coming you're trying to come into commentary at a very young age, when you haven't had that opportunity to develop that, then what's wrong with commentating on the AI? It's still a race. You might feel like a bit of a Burke for doing it, but what you're doing is you're starting to develop those kind of natural instincts for what to look at, what corner to is going to be a trouble spot. And then you start to develop a knowledge of, when you do go to league commentary, okay, this driver's done very well in the past. He was good fun when I commentated him, or her, of course. When I've dealt with them in the past, you start to develop a bit of a knowledge on the drivers themselves. All comes naturally. Again, comes back to that kind of natural, organic growth that everybody needs to go through, but it's very important that it is a natural process.
Yeah, and if your memory is so shit that you can't remember,
guilty.
I mean, also guilty, but if that is the case, just do it like I do. And just find every single statistic out there, put them all in a spreadsheet, and you'll always have something to talk about. But don't also. I would have to say that does come with its risks. Don't use don't go into commentary when you have such a spreadsheet. When you really want to go that way, I mean, why would you? For me, it helps, but I'm a very I'm thinking in numbers a lot, so I am just wired that kind of way. But if that does work for you as well, don't go into commentary or into a commentary thinking I'm going to use every single number in here. No, please don't.
No.
I have Kieran. That Kodiak. I don't know if you've ever seen my spreadsheet.
No.
Good.
Where is this going?
It's a book.
But no, it's not a book. But I think if you print it out, it would probably be 3 pages. But basically, there's about, if I estimate, I think there would be about 400 to 500 different informations in there.
Dear God.
Yeah, so overall race, I guess for AOR, which obviously we're all a part of, there's, for every driver, there's their career races in AOR, and yes, I've actually gone through all the forums to find that. Their career finishes, wins, points, pole positions, podiums, points finishes, the detailed results of every race, all these statistics of races, finishes, podiums, wins, pole positions, fastest laps, points, and points finishes for the current season. There's track info, obviously, that kind of stuff is necessary. There's tire information. There's pit stop strategy information, including pit stop time loss, which is something that I always test myself before every race. I just jump onto F1 2019, do a couple laps myself, and see how much time you lose in a pit stop. Canada is ridiculously low, obviously. And then there's, oh God, what else is there? I would have to open it, but there's a little bit more. There's an incident list from the last race, so I remember what happened. So you can talk about storylines. You can say, oh, those two came together last race. They come together again, if that happens. And yeah.
Preparation is very important. There's no two words about that. When I went into my first commentary, I didn't know anybody, and that made it much more difficult.
Yep.
Yeah, preparation is definitely important. What I would say though, is it's great to have that to refer to, but don't be reliant on it. You know, there will be some that, you know, you see these people that would give a speech like at a wedding or in front of people, and they literally read it word for word off of whatever they've written on. That is never a great way to present yourself. And you fall into the trap of doing something similar in a commentary situation where you're reliant on stats to bolster what you're. If you're looking at stats, it's not really commentary. You're literally reading. You're reading a story to the to the public. Nothing wrong with having them there, but particularly for an inexperienced commentator, I can imagine that some people might fall into the trap of absolutely being totally reliant on them. But in saying that, if you've got particularly a longer race, say an endurance race, for instance, and the field is just completely spread out, no one's attacking anybody, and you're just in the management phase of a race, and no one's anywhere near anyone, and you're thinking, what the hell am I going to talk about? Let's face it, any commentator has been there. I've been there many times, especially if you're on your own. It's difficult to know what you say. And that's something that I thought about before I started commentary, of what do I do if I've got nothing to talk about. Fortunately for me, on my very first commentary, I didn't really have that. But having things like that, having statistics and previous race incidents and stats about drivers is brilliant to have in those circumstances. So, prep work, very, very important. But again, try not to be too reliant on that, because the commentary still has to come from you, still has to come from your instinct, and it has to flow quite nicely. But some people might find that they need those statistics, additional facts and figures like that in order to make themselves, to make their commentary flow. At the end of the day, it's got to work for you and has to come, like I say, it's if that is your natural evolution, then crack on.
Yeah, and I would add, it does depend on what kind of direction a commentator, new commentator, or someone who's experienced wants to take. Whether they want to be that play-by-play guy who, basically the crofty.
Yeah, the hype machine. That's me.
The hype machine. Yeah, the commentator who describes what's going on track, who does basically all the not the heavy lifting, but the heavy talking.
Yeah,
or whether you want to be the color commentator, the kind of on the F1 games, Anthony Davidson, on the F1 F1 20, not the game, but real life now, Martin Brundle again. The guy who jumps in every now and then and explains technicalities, talks about strategy, talks about rules, talks about all of that kind of stuff. Depending on what kind of role, and there is no wrong or right, it has to suit the individual person. Obviously, I mean, Martin Brundle is not wrong for being a color commentator. I don't think anyone would say that.
You do what works for you. And actually, that links back to a point that Justin made when you spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, when he was talking about the kind of synergy that him and I have when we do F1 Esports. Neither of us are technically the lead. Yeah, we will alternate who opens the actual stream, who actually starts the race, who closes the stream, and who is doing what. It's not a case of one of us does more talking than the other, and the other one explains it. It's just we ping pong between each other, and that's great. When you're working with somebody else, you will find that a successful commentary duo gels very easily, and you bounce off each other very, very well. Case in point, you two. Your working relationship is brilliant. You instinctively know how to feed off the other one. It's not something you have to think about. You think, oh, hang on a minute, right? They're gonna, when they say this particular point, or okay, are they going to be coming to the end? You don't have any kind of thought on what the opposite commentator was doing. It just flows. Again, coming back to that word again.
Yeah, but for one, I would say that if a new commentator were to commentate with someone else and it doesn't, happen the first time that they gel with that other commentator, just don't give up. Usually that happens. The first time you commentate with someone else you've never commentated with before, you're gonna interrupt each other. It's just bound to happen. At some point, most likely at some point you're gonna learn let's say the mannerisms of the other, and you're gonna be able to adjust to that. But what would help that is talking after the stream to the other person and say, hey, I like that, I didn't like that, maybe we can try to work on that together to fix that. And to one thing that I found has really helped me in both ways, in not interrupting my co-commentator and not being interrupted by my co-commentator, is working on inflection.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt you there, Austin.
Well played. Well played.
A mute button.
Yeah. that would be a good idea. But no, inflection. If you talk and you end your sentence, make it clear for your co-commentator that you're about to end your sentence, not by saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm done." That is the worst way to do it. But by if it's a question, by raising your voice a little bit, and if it's a statement, by lowering your voice a little bit and going down at the end of the sentence, so the other person knows, oh, he just went down, now I can jump in, and it works seamlessly.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, again, there's a few ways you can do that. So, Justin will occasionally say, what do you think about that, Chris? Or, he'll drop my name in there to indicate exactly that he's come to the end of what he's saying, and that's my cue to suddenly then wake up and pay attention. No, is then to respond. You can do it if you're making a statement or just coming to the end of the sentence. Again, you can do it in the way of what I refer to as the car salesman way. And I've seen a few commentators do this. They're making a point and they'll make a pause, and that's the end of the sentence. Like that. There's a pause, and then there's a I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. It's heavy braking zone, and then it's turn one. That kind of thing. It's be careful if you're going to do it that way, because it almost sounds fake. But that's the kind of car salesman way of doing it. But there's that kind of drop in the sentence to indicate I'm done saying this point. On you go.
Yeah, I would make the argument that that's pretty much the it's not the what I said, the lowering your voice at the end of the sentence, because you're actually getting a little bit louder, a little bit more powerful with your voice to the car to basically do a car salesman voice, as you say it. But it is a similar. Just alter your voice in a way that the other person knows you're basically done. That is probably the best way. If you're a commentator, you have so much to work with in terms of not just obviously the words you choose, but more importantly, the way you say things, the volume, the inflection. That stuff is just especially if you're not sitting next to each other in a commentary booth. Usually sim racing commentary means you sit at your computer at home, the other person sits at their computer at home. You don't see each other. If you see each other, you have so many more options. You can give gestures and stuff like that. I've done that a couple of times. It's fantastic. Granted, with football. I always forget that I'm here with two Brits, so I have to say football.
It's all right. We won't judge you.
But I did that a few times. We were doing radio, so no one was able to see me anyway. And it was it was football, and I was talking. While I was talking, I was moving my hand to indicate that I'm still talking. And then when I got to the end, I was changing my hand gesture, and sometimes I was counting down. I was like 3, 2, 1 on my hand to indicate, there you go, now you can take over. But you don't have that when you're doing sim racing commentary usually, unless it's F1 Esports Pro Series, and you're there at the Gfinity Arena, sure. But
I've been up in that booth. and generally your eyes are facing down at the monitors that are giving you the action.
Yes, but you can look over every now and then. You can glance over, and you also have. I don't know if you have that, but us young people, we do have this thing called peripheral vision.
The cheek from Mr. Austin.
I'm sorry.
You're not at all.
I kind of am.
I kind of feel like I have to break up.
What you can obviously, if you do such a wow, if you do such a gesture, you should put your hand a little bit forward so the other commentator can see from the side of their eye what you're doing. And they can still follow the race or whatever they have in front of them. But that's advanced stuff. That again, if you're, at some event locally, then sure, you could do that. But usually you're sitting at home and your co-commentator is sitting at their home, and you don't see each other. You just have the voice to go off of, and that's when inflection comes in very well. And the thing is, I want to bring this one thing in because it really helped me, especially considering that I'm doing this in my second language here, to get better. And it's an ebook by Paul Schaloner, Paul Red Eye Schaloner, one of the greatest esports commentators, hosts, and analysts of all time, if not the greatest. And I don't remember what the ebook was called. Damn it!
I don't think he's done many, so it wouldn't be difficult.
Yeah,
to find
Talking Esports. There you go. Talking Esports. It is free. That's the greatest thing about it. It's free, and there's so much information in there.
He's such an amazing caster. He really is.
Yeah. And there's it's like 70, 80 pages or something. Some of it.
Well, you're going to say he's 70, 80 years old. I'm pretty
sure
he's not.
No, the ebook is like 70 to 80 pages. Obviously, not all of it commentary related. Some of it is about, hosting an actual on-site event, which, how many people do that?
Yeah, indeed.
But if you're starting out, there is a quite extensive section about just esports commentary in general. Obviously, also applies to sim racing commentary. That is just very helpful, and it did help me a lot.
Well, I think that seems like the perfect time to wrap up this this podcast. We've been going for well over an hour and 50 minutes. We've had plenty of talk.
I'm sure you said that sentence about half an hour ago.
Yeah, I did, and we kept on talking.
Well, we do have, Kieran, we do still have a personal moment of the week,
Oh yes, of course. Let's round out to 2 hours then.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to make it quick, okay?
All right, okay. Well, I feel like Chris, you should start off. What's your personal moment of the week? Doesn't have to be anything to do with esports, just for yourself.
I have a fairly mundane life, so that's not a particularly exciting thing to answer. I guess, like I mentioned earlier, I have two children, and my eldest, who has decided to come and sit next to me now. So, yeah, moderate the language. He's had some difficulties at school recently. So, getting a solution in place for him, having had similar problems when I was at school, it's nice to see that, he's developing well, and solutions we're putting in place seem to be working. So that's my personal moment of the week.
Awesome.
Oh, that's pretty good. I mean, I pretty much bettered anything I had, but how about you, Austin?
For me, it's I received an email earlier today, as I'm currently on the job hunt, and I did talk about that I had this job interview, to talk about that 2 weeks ago. It didn't go that well. They had the editor-in-chief who did the interview, was at a media company, told me that they have better applicants for that job, but they were still interested in me and wanted me for maybe some other job at the company. that didn't come to fruition. However, I got an email earlier today with an invitation for another job interview, which will be in just over a week.
Awesome.
And I'm very excited for that. And let's see how that one goes.
Good luck.
Well, good luck to you, and hopefully
Thank you.
everything works out for you. Again, my one isn't big. My one's to stay. Hey, I decided to go league racing again, which is something I haven't done for a long time. I think the last time I did it was back in 2018, something like that. That sounds
That's
about
a year
right.
ago.
It's only last year.
I know.
Oh,
I know,
way
that's
back when.
Way back when. You know what?
That's like
It's
when you
a long
said,
time in league racing. It's a long time, and
I've
especially
never-
for that rust to kick in.
jeez. I was
I-
taking a break from commentary between 2013 and 2017 or so. That's long.
That's
year.
long
Come on,
time,
Kieran.
You're talking about 365 days. That's a long time.
I took a break from racing the Gran Turismo FIA races for 8 months.
That's a long time.
No, it's not. Come on.
Well,
in
anyway,
F1, I assume, Kieran.
no, that's the crazy thing.
Ooh.
It's not this one. It'll actually be in Project Cars 2, which is something I don't normally race on. So I thought, let's push the boat out a little bit and see what happens. But
My
Yeah.
only league racing as a driver was in P-Cars 1, more accurately. Oh no, I did do a brief stint in P-Cars 2 as well. And let's just say I'm better suited to the commentary box than the driver's seat.
yeah, that's what decided it for me. I mean, I've got a decent amount of success in Formula One. I have podiums to my name, but never a win. So that's something I'd love to go for, but hasn't happened yet. So we'll see what happens.
See, maybe that's why I'm the color commentator here. I actually have some success, you know.
All right, okay.
Not too much. But
Well, yeah, you've won sim racing gear. I mean, that betters anything.
Yeah. But it wasn't because I was in such a great. I finished in such a great position. I think we talked about that last time, didn't we?
We did. Yeah.
It was for setting the same lap time 2 laps in a row. Which
Nice.
yeah, on Le Mans, like not just any old
What?
track. Yeah.
Bloomin' hell. That
The-
is very impressive.
And the greatest thing about it was that I was, after the first lap, I was actually announcing it to my co-driver who was, waiting in TeamSpeak at the time. I said, "Well, yeah, what was the last lap?" He told me the exact lap time. I said, "You know what? I'm going to try to do this again." Next
And you
lap,
did.
exactly to the 1,000th of a second, same lap time, 3
But
minutes something.
Bet you can't do it again.
No, probably not.
Not a chance.
But consistency is something I've always been good at. So
Well, that's rather proven by that one achievement.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's
and-
absolutely
and-
incredible.
And the thing is, it got me a whole Fanatec wheel and pedals at the time. That was like 2010, I think. It was
Very
the whole package would have cost, I think, like 400, 500 bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, indeed. Well, Chris, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up at around a 2-hour mark. But have you enjoyed yourself?
I thoroughly loved it. It's been a great pleasure to be to join you two on your show, and best luck for future episodes.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much. Hopefully we can have you on the show very, very soon. Of course, if you'd like to follow the legendary Chris Buxton, you can. He is at King_Kodiak. Oh, no, it's not. It's at King_Kodiak_UK.
It's
So
on the
you can-
screen.
Shh, shh.
It's literally
If you're listening,
on
you
the
can't see
screen.
it. Shh, shh, no,
Sure.
shush. Sure. We won't try it again, but if there is a second take, I'd love to take it. You can also follow Austin on Twitter as well. It is at the Badger Man, where the second E is 3. And if you really, really want to, you can also follow me on Twitter at KSMCGF1. It's robotic, but I spell it just like I spell my name every day. So, Austin, that about wraps it up for this week's podcast, or this fortnight's podcast, if you like. I think it went pretty well. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Really?
A lot longer
2
than you
hours of
wanted it
speaking.
to.
2 hours of speaking, and that's all you got. Yeah, it was all right, wasn't it?
I want to keep it under the 2 hour mark.
All right, well, fair enough. Well, thank you very much for listening along. If you liked it, make sure you do subscribe to the channel as well. In the meantime, though, thank you very much. I've been Kieran McGinley.
I'm Austin Smith.
And I'm Chris Buxton.
Take care of yourselves, and we will see you again next time.